lot of times in the NBA, things don't go according to plan. Not to draw another Laker parallel, but when the Lakers added Russell Westbrook to the core of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, brought back Dwight Howard and Avery Bradley, signed Malik Monk, and brought back Rajon Rondo, I did not think that this would be the expected result. But the best teams know how to adapt to their current situations, and the smartest players know how to adapt to their circumstances. Yes, Ben Simmons, I'm looking at you, buddy. You haven't been doing a good job at this, but someone that I want to tip my hat off to is John Wall, because he did something pretty phenomenal today, and we could draw parallels to multiple other players. And if you're a Houston Rockets fan, you should be very excited about this. Now, before we get to the content, guys, I want to let you guys know we are doing a huge Black Friday / Cyber Monday on all casual merchandise on TheFlightMike.com. This is the perfect gift to purchase somebody that thinks the Los Angeles Lakers are going to win the NBA championship this year. Hence why I'm wearing it, okay? We have a lot of content to get to today, so if you could hit that like button, consider subscribing and turning on our notifications to help the channel grow, and follow us on all of our social media platforms down below. And now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The Houston Rockets have been a very exciting offseason team. I mean, the moves they made this past offseason is stuff that you could get really excited about. Drafting Jalen Green with the number 2 overall pick, for example, who seems to have a huge chip on his shoulder already and is literally a walking Michael Jordan "I took that personally" meme, just because the Detroit Pistons didn't pick him number 1 overall in the NBA draft. And to Jalen Green's credit, he's had a pretty solid rookie year, but unfortunately for Jalen Green, his rookie year hasn't really been the greatest so far. And no, we're not about to call a draft bust just a mere 18 games into his career. We're not crazy over here. When I look at the Houston Rockets, I see a ton of promise and a ton of potential, but the one problem that I do think is missing is a lack of experience. I mean, just looking at this team, Josh Christopher and Jalen Green were drafted this year. Kevin Porter Jr. was brought in literally a year ago. Jayshawn Tate is a 1-year pro. Christian Wood is 26 years old, so is Jayshawn Tate. Dayshawn Nix was also drafted this year. Kenyon Martin Jr. was recently drafted as well. The only veteran talent that I really see on this team is Eric Gordon, I guess you could say Christian Wood, DJ Augustine, and John Wall. But unfortunately for the Houston Rockets, they had a little bit of a problem with John Wall early on. You see, John Wall was in a very tough situation, and he clearly inherited a situation that he just didn't want to be a part of. If you remember, when John Wall did get traded to the Houston Rockets, that was during a time where the Houston Rockets felt like if they traded Russell Westbrook for John Wall, then James Harden would be happy and James Harden would stay on the Rockets and try to run it back with this team that was a shell of its former self. But the Houston Rockets acquired John Wall. They also signed his buddy DeMarcus Cousins in the offseason, and the torn Achilles Kentucky brothers didn't really do much to impress James Harden, and James Harden eventually would do a series of various shenanigans to get himself traded to the Brooklyn Nets. All of a sudden, John Wall went from a situation where he thought he was going to be the Robin to James Harden's Batman to a player that was on a rebuilding team. Now, bear in mind, John Wall's contract is without a doubt the worst contract in the NBA. You could maybe make an argument for Chris Paul's contract being the worst in the NBA, but at the time that we're recording this video, the Phoenix Suns are on this insane win streak that nobody's paying attention to, so we can't really call that contract an L just yet. But in John Wall's case, you could literally compare John Wall to Ben Simmons in a way, because the man would sign a supermax contract right before the 2019 to 2020 season, and even before the contract extension would kick in, the man tore his Achilles tendon. Bruh. I said this before he came back that John Wall will be a shell of his former self once he returns from an Achilles tear. This is a player that is 100% very dependent upon his athleticism to make plays. He's always been a average to maybe on a good year above average to average 3-point shooter, because in the 2017 to 2018 season, John Wall did have a 37% 3-point percentage, but this is just a value that's been all over the place recently. It's pretty much the equivalent of paying a man that literally just tore his Achilles tendon, a supermax contract, probably the least desirable contract in the entire NBA. So the Wizards were able to trade Russell Westbrook for him, and then they were able to trade Russell Westbrook to the Los Angeles Lakers for some great role players. So that's some very crafty trade manipulation for the general manager of the Washington Wizards. And then there was an uncomfortable situation with the Houston Rockets and John Wall. You see, the Houston Rockets are currently in the midst of a rebuild, and it's going to take a while before Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. play like all-stars. If they ever do play like all-stars, which I'm confident they will, but it's too soon to tell. As a result, John Wall's in this very uncomfortable situation where he wants to play for a contender, but at the same time, no contender wants to take on that horrible contract. We've seen this happen multiple times. John Wall met with the Houston Rockets organization and told him, hey, I am going to sit out until you guys can find me a trade partner. We saw this happen with Andre Drummond. We saw this happen with LaMarcus Aldridge last year. And currently we're watching it happen with Ben Simmons. Although the only difference between what John Wall's doing and what Ben Simmons is doing is the fact that John Wall actually is realistic about his situation, whereas Ben Simmons is just a dumbass, bro. We made a video on him recently, like he's going broke. It's really bad. I'm gonna leave it in the end screen if you missed it, but like, yeah, it's gotten to a point where I'm actually slandering the man for how horrible of a decision maker he is, but I digress. In John Wall's situation, he understands that he has a crazy contract. Most contending teams won't want to pay that out, but at the same time, this is probably the last time he's going to get paid something like $44 million a year, so he's not going to agree to a contract buyout. So as a result, we got some good news if you're a Houston Rockets fan. Yes, I know you guys are currently 2-16 at the time that I'm making this video. It's before their Saturday game. Maybe you guys get to 3-16, maybe you get to 2-17, but the good news is John Wall is very, very realistic about his value in regards to the Houston Rockets, because apparently, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, Houston Rockets guard John Wall has expressed his hopes to the organization that he can resume playing for the team in the very near future. Sources tell ESPN story soon. So we have an update on that story, but I want you to understand that I have tremendous respect for John Wall for doing this, because he understands that, hey, I could either not play basketball all year or I can play basketball this year. If I play basketball, there might be a greater chance I get traded than if I don't play basketball, because maybe he comes back and maybe he shoots 37% from 3 this year. I don't know. I don't think it's likely, but he does something to show the Philadelphia 76ers or another point guard needy team that he can be the answer to any team's problems at the point guard position, and it might be worth trading for that bloated contract possibly. Probably not, but possibly. Either way, his best chances of getting traded off of this team would be to play for the Houston Rockets. Now, we get a little bit more information in regards to what's going on. Woj says that Wall and the Rockets had agreed on him sitting out until a trade could be found. But the 5-time All-Star guard talked to Houston general manager Rafael Stone on Friday about restarting a dialogue on a return to the active roster, sources said. Sides plan to talk again on Sunday. For Wall to play this season, there is likely a compromise that needs to be found between respecting Wall's stature as an All-Star on a Supermax contract and the Rockets' desire to have him play a complementary role to help develop their young core. John Wall didn't ask for this situation. He thought he was getting traded to a team that was going to contend originally, but he found himself on a team that ended up tanking and drafting Jalen Green, Josh Christopher, etc., etc. But I'm gonna be honest, I really like the idea of John Wall in the locker room because he is probably one of the most respected players in the entire NBA. We've talked about it on the Laced Up podcast, and my man Mike Korzemba made a video on John Wall's history, but this man had to overcome a lot to get to the situation that he's in. He knows how to carry himself as a professional, as you could clearly see from the situation, and could be a remarkable mentor and role model to the likes of Jalen Green and, more importantly, Kevin Porter Jr. So we wanted to get you guys this video yesterday, but we realized that today John Wall was actually going to meet with the Houston Rockets, and we we're going to get a little bit of a better idea of how the situation's going to go down. So we got an update first coming from Adrian Wojnarowski that says John Wall met with Rockets general manager Rafael Stone and coach Stephen Silas today to discuss a possible return to play in a role on the team. No agreement yet on how that would look. Wall has wanted a chance to be a starter again. Now, Champ Sharania actually goes a little bit more in depth on this, but even before Adrian Wojnarowski was able to give us this report, John Wall posted this video onto his Instagram account of him training at the very famous New York Summit, saying, "Born ready, been ready, hashtag free me, hashtag Wallway." So this is really interesting because I don't know if it's John Wall that wanted to sit out originally. I don't know if it's the Houston Rockets that said, hey, there's no way to play you where it makes sense for us. us. I don't really understand that aspect of everything, but Shams Charania goes ahead and clears this up a lot in his Athletic article. John Wall wants to return to play and start. The Rockets say that it's not guaranteed, so what are their options? So it seems like John Wall from the very beginning wanted to play, but the Rockets just felt like that would not do wonders for Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green's development. So let's take a look at this article. It says that Wall spoke to Rockets officials and stated his desire is to play, to have a starting role, and compete to maintain it. But the franchise informed him that they want him to come off of the bench and not start in order to play. The outcome of the conversations is that John Wall will continue to sit out games while remaining professional and being around and engaged with the team. Rockets officials informed John Wall in their conversations on Sunday that they are not willing to guarantee him a starting role. So a complete 180 from what we got yesterday and the earlier part of this video, where we thought that John Wall was the reason why he wasn't playing originally, but it seems like it's actually the Houston Rockets that came out and said, hey, we don't want you to play because we want Kevin Porter Jr. to play point guard, which as a basketball fan, it's not a pretty sight to behold, and we want John Wall to come off of the bench, which it might be a situation where I think John Wall would be the highest paid bench player in NBA history considering his contract. Though the article continues to say that the Rockets want John Wall to come off of the bench, sources said, but the one-time All-NBA guard believed that he at least deserved the opportunity to compete for a starting spot in training camp. Houston informed players during free agency that the team viewed John Wall as a reserve this upcoming season, sources said. On Saturday, ESPN reported that Wall and the Rockets had been discussing their return to play, which was yesterday. So prior to this, in September, Wall and the Rockets agreed that he would sit out in order to preserve his health and fitness as the two sides worked together on a trade. Now, a deal has not materialized, and moving Wall, who has 2 years and $91.7 million on his contract, appears improbable unless Houston incentivizes a trade with first-round picks. So what has changed from John Wall's perspective? His competitive juices have begun to sprout up as the season's gone on, and with prime years left, Wall believes he belongs back on the court. Now, I don't know if John Wall is still in his prime, just being honest, but I can understand just sitting on your butt at the age of 31 saying, hey, I might only have like 2 to 3 years left where I'm actually a good player, so at least let me play even if it's on a rebuilding team. This entire situation just makes me feel like the Houston Rockets are tanking on purpose, and I guess I can't really blame them. This year's NBA draft is actually looking pretty good with Paolo Banchero and Chet Holmgren, who is getting Kevin Durant comparisons, although he's looking very raw so far, but he did beat my UCLA Bruins, so I really can't talk, honestly. But here's the situation, and Shams Charania goes ahead and summarizes all of it at the end of this article for us, saying, for now, Wall isn't going anywhere. There have been no buyout conversations, sources said. So where do the Houston Rockets go from here? Well, here are some options. Houston can work on a plan to reintegrate Wall on the roster, as awkward as that may be, or Houston can simply waive him and set an offset clause in his contract to recoup any money he makes over the next 2 years, but that means significant dead money. Or Houston can keep Wall around the team. Wall has been a positive influence around the roster, or the Rockets can decline Wall's desire to play and send him home while having to continue to pay him. So it seems like a very weird situation. John Wall literally doesn't want to just keep his mouth shut and sit on the bench and just collect a bag. He wants to play, and that's something to be respected. Houston is clearly trying to tank here because otherwise they would have started him, but I feel like John Wall just playing on that starting five with Christian Wood and Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green would really do wonders for their development in basketball IQ, way more so than trying to tank for a better spot in the NBA draft. But that's my take on the situation, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. How should the Houston Rockets handle the John Wall situation? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.